So this is the paper from April this year. So I'm going to go through it and explain as I go what the questions are asking and how to do them. So let's start with question 1. It says the list contains the names of different parts of a cell. We've got the cell membrane and the cell wall, cytoplasm, nucleus, and chloroplast. So this table shows where different parts of the cell are found. Complete the table by placing ticks in the correct boxes. So we are, supposed to take these and say whether they're only in animal cells, only in plant cells, or in both animal and plant cells. So the cell wall has been done for us. That is found only in plant cells. A cell membrane is found in both animal and plant cells. Cytoplasm is the fluid that is inside the cell, and that we find in both of the cells. The nucleus is the center part of the cell where all of the DNA is kept, so that we find in both kinds of cells. And chloroplasts is what contains chlorophyll, which plants use in order to make their own food, so that we find in plant cells only. So there we go. And then it asks which part of a cell contains the genetic material, and this is the nucleus. So question 2 says, there are stars, planets, and other objects in space. So if we look over here, we've got some different kinds of objects. We've got Mars, which is a planet, the moon and natural satellite Polaris, which is a star, and Sirius, which is a star. So it says use the table to write down the names of 2 light sources in space. So that would be these 2, the stars. Mars and the moon aren't actually light sources. They reflect the light coming from the sun. So that is why the moon is fairly bright at night, because it's reflecting the light from the sun. Karina, I will answer that question afterwards, but let's just continue for now because it doesn't really have anything to do with this question. So use the table to write down the names of the 2 light sources. So the names are Polaris and Sirius. So humans can see Mars from the Earth. Describe why we can see Mars in the night sky. So here it would be the light from the sun. Reflects off of the surface of Mars. Okay. So describe why we cannot see details on the surface of Mars. So it is too far away for us to see any details. There is all of the atmosphere between us and the start of space, and then there is a very far distance. And the further something is away, the smaller it looks. So if I hold my hand close to the camera, you can see lots of detail. If I pull my hand further away, you can see less detail because it gets smaller. So our reason here is it is too far away for us to see the details. Okay, humans can see the star Polaris from the Earth. It appears to move during different times of the year. Oh, explain why Polaris appears to move. So let me draw a picture. So here we've got the sun, and here we have the Earth, and the Earth is moving around the sun, right? So at one time of the year, we are over here, and at another time of the year, we will be over here. So if we have a star in the sky, Polaris, and we look at it from here, then it would look to be about there-ish. But if we look at it when we're here, it would look to be over there. So this specific thing that we see is called parallax. And you do get parallax errors in terms of when you take measurements. This is just parallax in terms of we are moving, so it looks like the stars are moving. It isn't in actuality that much. It may be as much as just that far in the actual night sky due to the fact that it is very, very far away. But it's still just, it looks like the star is moving just slightly during different times of the year. So our explanation here is the Earth moves around the sun so as we are moving, Polaris appears to move. Okay. So I hope this one makes sense. So let's continue on. Okay, this diagram shows part of the rock cycle. And it asks us to complete the diagram by writing in the 2 missing types of rock. So we have 3 kinds of rock. We've got igneous rock, we've got metamorphic rock, and we have sedimentary rock. Okay, so the difference between these kinds of rock, igneous rock, it sounds like ignite. So igneous rock is volcanic rock. This is either when lava goes into the Earth's crust and then slowly cools down underneath the surface of the Earth, or it's when lava comes out on top of the Earth and then solidifies in the air. So that's the kinds of rocks that we would get from igneous rock. Metamorphic rock is that metamorph part means it is changing rock. So it is rock that has changed by something. So what happens here is this could be for various reasons. It could be next to a volcano and there's lots of heat and pressure happening, which could change something like sand into something like quartz. All sorts of different kinds of crystals is metamorphic kinds of rocks. The easiest example of a metamorphic rock would be a diamond. So diamond is literally any kind of carbon, so charcoal could work, that has been put under immense heat and pressure, and it would then be pushed together into such a tiny spot that it would start changing, which would turn the carbon from the something like charcoal into a diamond. So the key here is we need to look at these words. So here we can see that is heat and pressure. So from igneous rock to here, it uses heat and pressure. So that means in this one, we've got our metamorphic rock. Okay. Sedimentary rock is rock that is essentially in layers. That is what it calls there. Sediment is what you would get at the bottom of something like a lake or a river or something like that. So this is rock that has been weathered down into smaller and smaller particles. It's then been placed at the bottom of something like a lake or at the bottom of the ocean. And as the layers get put on top of each other, the pressure causes them to fuse into a rock. So the kinds of sedimentary rock that we would get is things like sandstone, limestone, all sorts of things like that. Those are sedimentary rocks. So the key here is you look for the word weathering. So here we've got weathering and weathering. So if we have weathering taking place, that is what is going to give us the sedimentary rock. Okay, so that's it for that question so far. So now B says that Pierre is investigating rocks and he describes the rocks. And here's a table of his observations. So we have 4 different rocks. They give us some colors. So there's gray and white rock. We've got black rocks, another black rock. Here's another black rock. So we've got 3 black rocks. And then they give us a density. We've got a low density, a high density, something that looks like glass, and then another low density. So it says, use this key to identify the 4 rocks. So let's start with looks like glass. So we have one of them that looks like glass, and that is number C. And we have 3 others that don't. So that's A, B, and D. Okay. So that means over here we've got obsidian, which is rock number C, because we can follow that arrow down. So now it says low density. So which rocks do we have that has a low density? We've got A and we have D. So yes would be A and D. And no, our high density rock over there is rock number B. So that would be basalt. So now the next question asks about its color over here. So we can look here. A is the gray and white rock. So that would be A. So that gives us pumice. And this would be D because it's black. So that would give us scoria. So now we just need to go write the names in over here. So we have B, which is basalt. D, which is scoria. A is pumice. And C is obsidian. Okay. You don't need to actually know what these rocks are. Basalt is the kind of rock that you would get if a volcano erupts and then the lava solidifies. That is basalt. It's a very hard rock. So yeah. Obsidian is volcanic glass. So it's a very specific kind of thing that forms there. It's very, very shiny and it can chip easily, but the chips leave a very, very sharp edge. So they used to use obsidian in the Stone Age to make things like knives or arrowheads or things like that because it was very, very sharp. Pumice is the kinds of rocks that they sell as foot scrubbers and things like that. It's a very porous rock and it looks kind of like a sponge, but out of concrete. That's essentially what pumice is. So yeah, I am not quite sure what scoria is. So question 4 says the diagram shows the human circulatory system. And then we have parts of the system that are labeled with the letters A through to G. And then it says use the diagram to identify the parts of the circulatory system from their descriptions. So let's just trace what happens. So we have some blood that is full of oxygen coming from the lungs. So it's one of these 2, and it goes into the heart. So here we need to look at the direction that these clefts are in. So these 2 point inwards. So this is where the blood goes into the heart and then out. So this part is going to go out through there to the body. This is the capillaries where it's going to be exchanging the oxygen from the blood into the cells for some carbon dioxide. And here it's going back into the heart because these point this way and then that way. So it's going to go out through there back into the lungs. So it says the part that pumps the blood to the lungs, so that would be this part here. So that's letter F. The part where the oxygen leaves the blood. So that is over here in the capillaries where they are giving, where your blood is giving the oxygen that it has to the cells to be able to be used. So that would be letter E. The part where blood is at its greatest pressure. So that would again be here in the heart. This would be the part of the heart that is pumping the blood to the body, is the one that is under the highest pressure. So that would be part C. Okay, and then it says an artery that takes the blood to the body. So again, we had this going out here, so now it's going into the body. So that would be part D. Okay. So question 5 says the diagrams show the particles in different substances. Draw a line to match each diagram with the description of that diagram. So we've got a bunch of descriptions. We have a mixture of compounds, a mixture of elements, a mixture of elements and compounds, and a single compound. So our difference here is what a compound is and what an element is. So an element is something that is comprised of only one substance from the periodic table. It isn't bound into a molecule. It's just literally one kind of thing. Then a compound is some elements that have bound into one molecule. So this would be two different elements combined into one. So if we have a mixture of compounds, this would be lots of different elements bound into one, but a mixture of different ones of that. Mixture of elements would just be a bunch of single ones. So this one here is a good example of a mixture of elements. So we can connect those. We have a mixture of elements and compounds and a single compound. So this over here, this is a single compound. So our last one, and here is a single element. We don't have one that is just a single element. Here we have there's some compounds and there's some elements. So here we have a mixture of elements and compounds. And those are the only three there. So that is that question. So question 6 says that Sophia and Jamila are investigating photosynthesis. They're using water plants, and this is the apparatus that they use. So they have a little lamp, and they have a water setup over here with some water plants and a funnel, and then they catch the gas coming up. So in their first experiment, they measure the number of gas bubbles made in 1 minute. So what is the name of the gas that is made in photosynthesis? And that would be oxygen. Because plants, unlike humans, plants take in carbon dioxide and then release oxygen. What equipment does Sophia use to measure 1 minute? This would be a stopwatch. Okay. So B says Sophia and Jamila do 2 more experiments. They move the lamp further away from the plant for each experiment, and here are their results. So we have the distance between the light and the plant. So here the light is close to the plant. Here it's further away and even further away. So here you could see it made lots of gas bubbles, it made less gas bubbles, and even less gas bubbles. So why do they use 1 minute for each experiment? And our reason here is so that the experiments are fair. And that fair means so that we can compare the different experiments with each other. Because the only thing that we changed, we didn't change the amount of time we're measuring, we just changed how far the light is. So complete the sentence describing the pattern of results. As the distance between the light and the water plant increases, so this is how it's increasing. Here we can see it decreases. So the number of bubbles decreases. Okay. So predict the results for a distance of 30 centimeters and a distance of 50 centimeters. Let's go over here. 30 centimeters is somewhere between these two, and 50 centimeters is somewhere after this one. So they will mark it right as long as your number is somewhere in between these two numbers or somewhere below this number. So if we look at these two numbers over here, we can go find one that is sort of somewhere in the middle. So I'm going to go with 40 and a distance of 50 centimeters. So it has to be less than 26. So let's go with 15. Those are some good numbers, and they will mark these correct. So circle the correct word or phrase that completes the conclusion. The rate of photosynthesis increases, does not change, or decreases as light decreases. So as the plant gets less light, the rate of photosynthesis will also decrease because we're getting less bubbles. Okay. So question 7 says that Lily is balancing a ruler on a pivot. And then it says we have to calculate the size of force A. So here is force A. So this has to do with mechanical advantage. I did do a lesson on that. And good news for you guys, the live lesson library is supposed to be going up today. And that means that all of the previous live lessons that I have done has been recorded and are there in the live lesson library so that you can go rewatch them if you'd like. In the descriptions of the videos are all of the links that I have used, all of the YouTube videos, all of the simulations and things. Their links are in the description boxes. So you can literally go click on them and go to them and discover them for yourselves, watch them for yourselves. Okay, so here we have mechanical advantage. So there are two ways of calculating mechanical advantage. And it is the input over the output. So we have the input length over the output length. Over here. And there's another formula for that, and that is the input force over the output force. Okay. So let's see, which do we have? We've got this length and we have this length. So we've got the input length and the output length. We've got this force, but we don't have this one. So we don't have one of these. We can go work out our mechanical advantage using these lengths. And then after that, we can go work out our remaining force from there. So let's go work it out. So our mechanical advantage. Now we need to go find our lengths. It doesn't actually matter which length we put where. If we take this as our input length, then we must just remember that this is also supposed to be our input force. So let's go do that. Our input length here is 6 centimeters. And our output length is 12 centimeters. So now just remember our input force is A, and our output force is the 2 newtons over here. So if we have designated one of them as the input, that side stays our input. So I am going to write over here, this side is my input and this side is my output. So I remember. Okay. So we have 6 centimeters over 12 centimeters. So our mechanical advantage is 1/2. Okay. So now we have 1/2 over here in place of our mechanical advantage. Our input force, we don't know, that is just A. And our output force over here is 2 newtons. So we want to go figure out how big A is. So that means that over here, we want to get rid of this 2 newtons below the line. So we are going to times it with 2 newtons. And what we do on the one side, we have to do on the other side. So on this side, we end up with 1 newton. And over here, we just have A. So our force for A is 1 newton. Okay, does this make sense to you guys? I hope so. The next question starts there, but I am going to stop here for today. So we got up to question 7. Okay. Are you stuck with the mechanical advantage? Okay. So mechanical advantage is how easy a specific lever is making it something to be. So let me explain. If you say have let's go with a seesaw. A seesaw has a mechanical advantage of 1 because the length on the one side of the seesaw is the same as the length on the other side of the seesaw. So if you put a force on this side, it's going to output that exact same amount of force on the other side. So now we get different kinds of levers that we can use. So say if you are thinking about something like a wheelbarrow, the distance between the load and our pivot, so that distance between the wheel and where we put all of the stuff inside the wheelbarrow, is shorter than the distance between the handlebars where we can pick it up and where our pivot is. So a wheelbarrow does have some mechanical advantage. What that means is that if we pick it up by the handles, we are actually going to be inputting less force than it is busy outputting. So it's going to feel a little lighter picking up all of these things in the wheelbarrow than it is going to be to just literally pick up all of the things in the wheelbarrow. So this is what we mean with mechanical advantage. It is how much this specific pivot system that we are using, this lever, is making it for us to do something. This is why if you have a very big rock, you could very easily lift it by using a long plank and a small rock over there. So this would be our pivot. This is our output that we want. And here we can input some force. So here, this distance is short and this distance is long. So we're going to get some mechanical advantage. It's going to take us a lot less force that we have to put in over here in order to get this rock to move. So that is what we mean with mechanical advantage. We've got 2 formulas we can use to work it out. And our formulas are basically whatever we input over whatever we output. And that is our mechanical advantage. Okay, so there's 2 different formulas. We can use our input length over our output length, or our input force over our output force. So that is the formulas that I used here. So I am going to erase our bits that I wrote here so that we can work it out again, so that I can explain it a bit better. And this time I am going to change my input and my output side so you guys can see what's happening. Okay, so here I'm going to change this and this. So let's make this side our input and this side our output. Okay, so now my first formula says we need our input length over our output length. So that is this distance over here and this distance over here. That is our input and output lengths. So our input length here is 12 centimeters. And our output length is 6 centimeters. Okay. So once we have decided which side is our input and our output, then we need to go start, then we can start working it out. But our input side and our output side has to stay the same. Our answers are not going to differ depending on which side we pick input and which side we pick output. So mechanical advantage here is 12 divided by 6, so that gives us 2. So we are going to put 2 over here in the place of our mechanical advantage. Now we have our input force, so that is the force on this side. So that would be 2 newtons. And our output force, which we don't know, so that is A that we want to go work out, but since I don't know it, I'm just going to put an X in its spot. Okay. So now I want to go work out what X is. So this is 2 over 1. So I am going to use cross multiplication over here. So that means I'm going to take my 2 newtons, I'm going to times it by 1 and put it on one side of my equation. And then I'm going to take my 2 and I'm going to times it by x on the other side. So 2 newtons is twice my force. I need to divide by 2 on this side, and I need to divide by 2 on this side. So that gives me x is 1 newton. So my force at A will be 1 newton.